Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. In this lesson, we're going to be continuing on in our first-person shooter, and we're going to be making some enemies that we can shoot and do some cool things with. So in between videos, I did a couple of small things. I gave our grid material of this concrete tile at a scale of 2, and then I put 2 different boxes here. One, I put this 2 times the size burnished steel, and this other one is a cut stone. This is of our type stone, and this is just any enemy chest, whatever you want to call it. That's what those are. In between videos, I gave you the task of putting different impact effects in. It all should have been relatively straightforward. The only ones that might have been a bit confusing were the grenade launcher and the rocket launcher. For these ones, all of the impacts are going to be grenade explosion, and then rocket explosion and rocket explosion. Then I made these decals pretty large. That should be the only thing. And quite honestly, I mean, this one, the sniper rifle, it will work right now because all these weapons are set to be hit scan, but we will eventually be switching those over to be projectiles, and we'll do different events for them in that way. But we will be using those same impact effects, so it is good to slot them in now because they will work. But we need to add our enemies first, just with how the projectile script and blueprints are set up. It'll make it easier doing it this way. So yeah, I think that is everything. So let's get started by creating a new folder and call it enemies. And set it to our color. Inside of here, let's go ahead and make a character, and we'll call this BP underscore enemy. Another thing that I want to do is create a new folder and call this interfaces, because we're going to be making a couple blueprint interfaces in this video. But let's start just by opening up our enemy here. So nothing too crazy here. The only thing we'll be doing is the mesh. We're going to make the mannequin. You can pick male or female, whatever you'd like. Let's go ahead and rotate him 90 degrees. Let's set the capsule height to be 95, and we can keep 34. And what we can do is we can go to left or right mode. We can grab him and just move him down. I have to probably change the snap settings. Just move this down to maybe 5 right there to negative 95. Rotate negative. So Z location of negative 95 and rotation of negative 90. We'll set him up in the capsule component as 95 as well. Switch back to perspective mode, and here's our character. The wireframe doesn't matter as much. It doesn't need to be overlapping his arms because we will be hitting these, like, we're not intersecting with this capsule component. This is just so that if we drag him out, he'll actually stand level with the ground like that. So yeah, that's all looking good. So let's go ahead and select our mannequin man and hit the browse. And then you should see for the male variant a physics asset. Let's open this up. And so now we've got a bunch of these different pelvis, spine, all these different things. These are physical assets. So let's go ahead and slot these in. So we can start with the head, physical material override, and let's make it enemy head. Let's just try to select everything. So like if this is just in the general area, we'll call this the chest. The spine, we'll call it the chest. We can probably delete some of these, honestly, but we'll call it the chest. Upper arm, we'll call it arm. Lower arm, I'll still just call that arm. Hand, I'll make it hand. Upper arm, lower arm. You can select multiple ones, call it arm. Hand is hand. Neck, head. These two are both going to be head, thigh, right, and calf, right. These two those 4 are all going to be leg, and then foot, ball, and then football left and right are going to be, I just said football, are going to be foot. All right, so now all of these should have something slotted in like that. Now, if you remember in a previous video, I talked about the damage threshold scale. So if we go back into our materials, and let's go with enemy arm. So we have this damage threshold scale. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about this. So if we set our weapon to be 25 damage, right, per bullet. If this is set to 1, how this is eventually going to be set up, that means that the bullet will do 25. So like the head will set it as 1. But think of this as like a multiplication number. So let's say I want, if I set this to be the arm to be like 0.5, right? Say our bullet does 25 damage. That means if we hit him in the arm, that bullet will do 12.5 damage. So we can go ahead and slot these in. So the arm, I'll keep that at 0.5. The chest will be 0.8. So you can think of it as like what percentage. So if we hit him in the foot, it'll be 30% of whatever the total damage number normally is. The hand will make 0.2. Hand won't do that much damage. The head will be 100% of the damage that we set, and then the leg will be like 0.7. A little bit less than the chest, but a little bit more than the arms. Yeah, that should be good. Okay. That's what's going to control the different amounts of damage we do. It's going to do a little bit of multiplication. You will see. You will see. Okay. Out of event begin play, we want a reference to our character. No, we don't want to cast to ourselves. Player. That's maybe in that instance where you use pawn, because pawn is the one that we're going to control. So like technically these are both characters, but the pawn would be the one that we are controlling. So you can use get player pawn. I'm just used to using get player character. It'll do the same thing for the most part. For most instances in a game like this, it doesn't really matter. Okay, cool. So now what we are gonna do, so we're gonna make an interface. So let's go into our interfaces folder, right click, and go to blueprint interface. So a blueprint interface is a collection of one or more functions, name only, no implementation, that can be added to other blueprints. So how do I explain? It's like, so an interface doesn't actually do anything. It's just a place where you can store several different functions, and then you can call those events, column, within multiple different blueprints. And you'll kind of see. It'll be one of those things that you'll see as we go along. So let's just call this enemy take damage. Let's open this up, and let's create a function and call it enemy take damage. You know what? I might change the default name. Let's call it BPI take damage. Blueprint interface take damage. Because we want the enemy to take damage, and we also want to take radius damage, and we're going to set both of those in here. So we have enemy take damage, and then we want to have 2 inputs on this. We want to have one be called weapon stats, and we're going to create that in a second, and then one called hit result of type hit result. Okay, and we have to make a struct for our weapon stats. So let's go into data, right click, and let's go blueprint structure and call it S weapon stats. So a struct is slightly different from an enumeration. Enumeration is like a list. A structure or a struct is like a bucket of variables. So you can add a bunch of variables to this one little thing. So we're going to make one called damage, and this is going to be of type float. This will control how much damage our weapon does. And then for our ones that explode, we'll have a float for impact radius. Like I said, this would be only necessary when for like our grenade launcher and our rocket launcher. So we want to make this of type weapon stats. You can see it right there, like that. Okay, so this is our interface. So now if we go inside of our enemy blueprint, we can call event enemy there we go. Enemy take damage. I guess I didn't need to put event. Oh, well, that didn't work. Why isn't it working? I compile. Oh, I forgot the most obvious part. Okay, we need to actually add this interface to this blueprint. Okay, so under class settings, you'll see interfaces, and we need to add one. And let's go ahead and add BPI take damage. So now when we add this interface to this blueprint, we can now call enemy or event enemy take damage. So now we can have an event in this blueprint, and you can see our little inputs here. And so whichever blueprint that we add that interface to, we can call this event to run off of it, and it'll have these same outputs. So it's kind of helpful if you want to have like think of a game like Fortnite. Okay, there's a lot of different things in Fortnite that take damage. You can destroy the buildings, the houses, the trees, and you can damage the players. So you can have an interface that has inputs of all different types of data that you'd want to pass through of, different things that take damage. But like a tree will take damage differently than a part of a building would, and differently than a player. They all have different amounts of health, and they all take different amounts of damage. So by using interfaces, you can create one interface, and then you can customize essentially like those types of things on a more simple level. But you don't have to create a different event every single time. You can just call the interface and then run that event off of the interface instead of making it 4,000 times. All right, so let's create a variable and call this is dead. We want to check to see if our enemy is dead. It's the first thing that we're going to do. So we don't want it to take damage if we're dead. Okay. And in typical me fashion, we're going to run out of the true branch. If we're not dead, then we want to do some damage. Let's go ahead and let me show you this. So weapon stats, and let's break weapon stats. And so now we have damage and impact radius, which was what was on our struct. Okay. But we want to be able to calculate how much damage that we want to do. So let's store that in a function. So we'll call this calculate damage. And let's add some inputs here. We'll create a float called damage. And let's also pass in a hit result of type hit result, like that. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to set this to a local variable so that I can use it later in the script. This one isn't going to be too long, and we're going to add a return node, and this is going to be a float as well, and it will be, call it calculated damage. So this is what's actually going to calculate how much damage we do to our enemy. So let's break the hit result. All right, and then off of the physical material, we want to get the destructible damage threshold scale. All right, so once again, like I said, if we go into materials and we go into our enemy hand, we're getting a physical material, and then we're checking for this damage threshold scale. So in this chance, like I said, we're doing 30% of whatever we put in as the damage that our weapon's going to do. Then we want to multiply this by our local damage. So like I said, if this is 25, we're multiplying that by, in this case, if we hit the hand, it would be like 0.3. And then we're setting that as our return. We're returning that number. So now back in our event graph, let's call calculate damage. So we want this damage to be passed in like that. So we're going to assign this struct weapon stats to each of our weapons on our base, right? So then we can individually in each blueprint, like we've been doing many times on all of the children, we'll slot in how much damage we want this weapon to do. So I've been using the number 25. So our assault rifle does 25 damage. It's going to pass that. It's going to have that variable stored 25 in its weapon stats. It's going to take that data. It's going to pass it in. It's going to calculate it. It's like, okay, I hit the hand of this enemy right now. My assault rifle does 25 damage, but I hit the hand. So I'm taking 0.3 of that or whatever it was. And then I'm going to return 7.5 damage. All right. So that is how that's working. And then we want to pass in this hit result as well to make sure that we have, well, we're hitting something because that would be awkward. And then what we want to do is we want to update our enemy's health. So we will want to create a new function for this and call this health update. And let's make a float and call this damage applied like that. And let's make this into a sequence because we'll do a couple of different small things here. Because we want to be able to check to see if our enemy's dead, essentially. So let's add a return, and we'll say is dead and make it a Boolean. All right. So out of our damage applied, let's go greater than or equal to, and then say branch. Whoa, ho ho! Hit the wrong key there. Branch. That's more like it. Okay. And let's make a new variable and call this current health. It's going to be our enemy's health. Type float. So if our damage applied is greater than or equal to our current health. So let's say our current health is 10 and our damage applied is 20. Okay, if this happens, then we want to set is dead, or no, actually, let's create a local is dead. Like that. You know what? It might do the same thing. Whatever. This is just how I did before. We'll set local is dead to be true. And then we will make sure that our health doesn't go beneath 0 by setting it to be 0. So this is what happens if they die. Okay, if they don't die, then we want to take the damage that we've applied. We want to subtract that. We want this to be on the bottom. I'll drag this over here. Like that, sure. And let's take the current health. So our current health is greater than the amount of damage. So our current health is 20 and we're doing 10 damage. Then we want to subtract 20 from 10. And then set that as our new current health. And then out of then 1, we want to check and see if we are dead. And we will plug in local is dead. Like that. To check and see. So we created this variable local. We could have done it without that probably. We could have just used the is dead, but it is what it is. We're setting the local as the same thing anyway. So it really doesn't matter. So that's what we're doing here. Then if we come out of here, then we want to do our health update. The damage applied is going to be the calculated damage. And then we're returning this is dead. So we want to set is dead to whatever the output of this was. So if we run out of health, we are dead. Our health is 0 now. If the damage that we applied is less than the amount of health that we have, then we're just going to say, well, we haven't set this to be true yet, so we're not dead. Okay. So we're setting that variable to be that. We're going to do an if statement. Okay. And then if we, for the time being, let's just print a string and say, I'm dead, if I can spell right. And then if we're not, we'll say I'm still alive. All right. And that should be all we kind of need for now. We will add more to this later, some effects, but just for the sake of it, we can see if this works. Calculated damage. Why don't we also print a string here so you can actually see the damage that what our health is at. So let's set that to be 100 by default. Current health is 100, and we'll see the subtraction occur and do all of that. So the last thing that we need to do here is go into our weapon base, and we want to add that struct. So let's go weapon stats, make it of type weapon stats. All right. So now you can see those stats. So let's go into our, I was already in the right folder, wasn't I? Pistol, and you should see weapon stats. Let's have this do 20 damage. We don't need to worry about impact radius because it doesn't do any of that yet. So now if we hop in and we play, and we pick up this gun, and we shoot our guy. And it doesn't work. I must have forgotten one step. Oh, yeah, I know what it is. We need to actually call the event that we made here. So if we go into our weapon base, let's go ahead and create a function in which we add damage to our guy. So yeah. Okay. So let's add a new function and call this add damage. Okay. Add damage is going to have an input of a hit result as per usual. We always want to pass through our hit result so we don't lose it. And then what we want to do is we want to get, since we haven't added the interface, we want to get a message of enemy take damage, that interface. And so it's going to be asking for some stuff. So what's our weapon stats? Well, it's whatever we plug into in our weapons. So now that data is beginning passed through. We want to break this hit result right here. Let's plug the hit result into the hit result so that it just drags on through like that. But we need to give this a target to hit. Like what's taking damage. In this case, it's going to be the hit actor, which is our enemy. An actor. And we're dragging that on through like that. Okay, so this like passes info through weapon to enemy taking damage. So this is what's actually passing through the amount of damage that like our weapons do. And we've did we add that yet? No, we haven't. Okay. So then coming out of here, we need to add damage like that, and that's gonna be asking for a hit result, and then that hit result is that. So it's just the same one like that. So now, hope to God, it should work because we have that 20 damage passing through. And it still is not. What is going on in my life? Why? Why? I say why. Okay, so I have figured out the issue. So if you remember when we calculated our, what's up with that? When we calculated our line trace, we have actors that we will hit and ones that we will ignore. So what we could do is we could add a pin and add pawn or something else, because that's what this is default set as. But what we want to do, what we can do, is so we go to the mesh, and you'll have probably different settings in this. It'll probably say pawn or something like that. Go ahead and set it to custom. Make sure collision is enabled, query and physics. And set the object type to world dynamic. If you do those three things on the mesh, so that's where physical objects are, and then you pick up the pistol and you walk on over here, then you will get the impact effects and all the math is going on. 30, and he's dead. And so he's not taking any more damage, but he is a goner. And I believe this is working, so if I know we don't have perfect aim, but if I hit him in the head, it should be 80. 652. Might be something screwy with that too. It's hard to tell right now with the math. I might have also screwed up my impact effects or my materials. It seemed like the head was... Well, the head is set to be there. Yeah, that will be harder to tell if the exact damage calculations and all that stuff is working until we get the damage numbers on the HUD showing up. But if that's wrong, that'll be an easy thing to fix. It's probably a goofy mistake, just like setting this to the wrong type or setting the wrong damage threshold scale, or maybe even on the physics body of the mannequin here. Maybe setting some of these things as the wrong ones or something like that. You never know. There's some goofy things that can happen, but that is working as intended though so far. We can pick up our weapon. So you can go in and go to the other hit scan weapons right now, and you can assign different damage numbers underneath the weapon stats in between videos, and see how much damage you want to do. That'll probably take more fiddling with when we actually get the damage numbers and we get different things to happen when our enemy dies. But for the time being, you can screw around in there and have some fun. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. If you have questions, let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.